Hello. Good evening. Hello. Good evening. I just want to let you all know. Thank you. I just want to let you all know there are more chairs coming.
Hello, how are you?
We're just waiting for a key to the room, and then we will have some more chairs put out for you. Thank you for your patience.
That's what I was asking.
Three short comments. This is new ground that we are covering. I know I've said that before. This is new ground we are covering. I'm getting calls from around the country asking how we even got this far. This is new ground we are covering. Give yourselves room to think this through. Others are watching us. The second point I'd like to bring to you is that a few meetings ago, I said to you as commissioners that history has shown us over and over again that we fail because we fail ourselves. Rarely are we attacked and obliterated. We often fail because of infighting. We often fail because we don't support each other. Now, I'm saying to you, that is a historical fact. Don't let it be a historical fact when our children look back on what we've done. The third point I'd like to bring out is this. Don't forget our common cause. We have our differences. We have our differences because of history, because of neighborhoods we live in. This is the first time we sat at the same table, good people, as neighbors and neighborhoods, and for a political purpose of advancing our interests in a material way. This is the first time we've done this. Let me encourage you to remember why we are sitting at the table. Life is going to be better in Asheville, Buncombe County for what we are doing. That's our common cause. And whether white folk want to recognize it or not, it'll be better for them too.
All right.
All right? There it is. Stand on the same ground, common cause, new ground. That's what I have. Let's take the roll.
All right, I'm going to start taking the roll. As I call your name, please say aye. Dwayne Barton. Norma Baines.
Here.
Renata Conyers.
Here.
Christopher Gordon.
Here.
Roy Harris.
Here.
Joyce Harrison.
Aye.
Shonda Jackson. Kimberly Jones. Dewana Little. Dwayne McAfee.
Here.
Bobette Mays.
Present.
Glenda McDowell.
Here.
Tamara Miller. Dwight Mullen.
Present.
Mildred Nance Carson. Osandu McPeters.
Here.
Thomas Priesta. Dwayne Richardson.
Here.
Eric Robinson.
Here.
Raynita Waters.
Present.
Cece Weston.
Here.
D. Williams.
Here.
MZ Yehuda.
Present.
Keith Young.
Here.
Our alternate is D. Burris.
Here.
Tiffany Debolo.
Here.
Shakiki Giles Bayton. Jesse Ray.
Here.
All right, we have a quorum.
We have one action item, the approval of minutes. Are there corrections, are there amendments to the minutes as they currently stand? If not, is there a motion for approval?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the minutes be approved from last meeting.
It's been moved. Is there a second?
Second.
Second. With no objections, can we take a voice vote? All those in favor should say yes, please.
Yes.
Opposed? Thank you. Please.
Congratulations, you all. We have increased our survey participation by 400%. It might be a little above 400%, but I really appreciate all of the feedback in the surveys, all the questions that you submitted, so thank you so much. And I encourage you to continue to do the same because it helps us improve how we make progress in these spaces together, so thank you.
Our objectives today, if you can read your agenda, this is an update from the city. We have a community engagement follow-up conversation and decision to make. Reparations Commission timeline, key milestones will be identified. And there's a major section beginning hopefully at 7 o'clock from our auditors on the Stop the Harm initiative. Salah.
Good evening, all. It's good to see you this evening. I have just 2 updates for you. I won't take up much of your time. The first update is, this is my first meeting as Equity and Inclusion Director for the city. Thank you. Normally, I would take the minutes. However, Natalie Bailey, who has been doing work in the background all along, will be taking the minutes for you. So I just want to let you know that. And then the second thing, if we could put that on the slide, is there will be a change in the way you are paid your stipends. So I wanted to let you know that that change is coming. It'll start in May, actually June. So right now, Christine with Civility Localized is the administrator, and she actually pays the stipends. Her contract ends in April. So the last payment that you'll receive from Christine will be in May. Once that takes place, you will become a vendor. You'll see, I'm not sure if they have it up yet. Yeah, there we go. You'll become a contractor with the city. So I will be working with the IFA facilitators to help you get started. You will need to sign up to become a vendor, which will be the first thing. We'll begin the transition, and I want to start it really early because I don't want any hiccups with your money. I want to make sure that when it's time to get paid, you get paid. So we're going to start the process early. From February to March of 2024, we're going to get you signed up as a vendor, and then we'll get you registered as well. So you'll complete a commission service agreement, which is something that's going to be required. Right now, it's headed over to legal for them to take a look at. It's a really simple contract. And I can't see, sorry. And then the deadline to get registered and sign the agreement will be March the 29th, 2024. Again, I'm going to be working with your IFA facilitators so we can get you signed up. And you can also reach out to me, right? I'll be able to help you as well. And then the required information, and I know that I've asked for W-9s before, but because this is going to be with the city, I am gonna need your W-9, we're gonna need your legal name, we're gonna need your address, we're gonna need your social security number. Again, that's for the city. And then your payments with the city will begin in June. So the work from May will be paid by the city in June. And that's it.
Thank you.
So just want to provide that update. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to me at any time. Thank you.
Please. As our next speaker is making her way to the podium, as points are made, remember to identify yourselves and speak into the mic for the purposes of we're streaming live.
My name is Dewana Little, and I am presenting the community engagement proposal to the commission. So, over this time, we have talked about community engagement a lot, and so over the last few months, we have seen different iterations of a community engagement plan that has been presented to our commission. And what I did after last meeting, given the input from the commission, I created working with some community members as well as city staff to create a community engagement proposal for how we get into community over these next few months, and you will hear more about the timeline of what that looks like when Denisha comes up following me. But the purpose is to receive feedback from community on draft CRC recommendations. And I look around this room and I see all of these wonderful faces, and I'm like super excited because this is what I want to see with us on the ground in community is these wonderful faces and getting the input that we need for our recommendations to be community supported when we present the city and Buncombe County. So, the plan in your package, you will see, the plan is to work with city and county marketing team to develop new flyers with the QR code for easy access. So that people, even when we pass out the flyers, if they cannot make it to an input session, they can still provide their input in a way that it is collected in a folder so the full commission can see the input from community in real time. And so, that's one of the things. Also, social media, building a social media presence. We are in the age of technology, and everybody's on social media, one platform or another. And so we definitely want to make sure that this process is being represented and promoted through those platforms as well. And updates, providing the community with updates. When you go into a community and people are going to a grocery store and someone approaches you and they don't understand what we're doing and what this process is, that's the issue, especially when it's Black people and that's what this process is about. And so, being able to have the tools that we need and have been asking for, so I do want to give credit to our commission. We have been requesting these things in different forms. So now the development create that tool to be able to do what we've been asking to do. So preparation. This is the big part. We need CRC members to complete the following. IFA leaders to send recommendations to facilitators in a simple sentence structure, and that's with your recommendations. Summing all of that up, all of the work that's y'all put into those recommendations up into sentences, simple sentences that we can use as a part of a survey, or specific questions that y'all have for community that we can include. And so we're working on IFAs around that. Also, we need participants from our CRC members on the committee to plan and help us to get these community engagement and these input sessions in order. And so it's the sign-up sheet back there that I will pass around for all those that are interested. There's also a sheet that I will pass around just to see what y'all schedules look like so that we can, like, what's the best days and times that work for y'all so that we can really be intentional about how we schedule the input sessions across the city and county. So, yeah, so that's that. And so if you turn to your next page, next slide, please. Thank you. This is a draft timeline of what this process could look like. And so right now we're in the midst of recruiting for the planning committee. And so there's also going to, hopefully it's being proposed, a jamboree for reparations downtown in April, to really bring people out. I've been talking to some of my classmates who left Asheville, but their family they're intergenerational natives of Asheville, to come back and be able to participate in this conversation and the work that's happening here, because it is historical in nature. So y'all can look at these dates and times, these dates, and see what it could look like, so we can do a lot of work in a short period of time. We are limited, our extension was until June, and so we really gonna have to run both processes parallel. So creating and updating our recommendations and finalizing those, while also side by side having the community engagement and input sessions and all of the things that we need to engage the community into this process. And I'm gonna be specific. When I say community, I'm talking about Black communities, because I need to be intentional. And I feel the need to be in this process and giving input on our recommendations, because we are making some major decisions for the Black people of Asheville and Buncombe County. And so please look over that. And as Renisha does her report, we'll actually touch back on this again as we start looking for consideration for a vote to move forward with community engagement. Y'all asked and y'all received, so let's, please look over it and y'all have a few minutes. So I'll let Renisha come up with her.
Well, before we move, stay right there. Does anybody have any questions about what is being proposed? Any comments, Mr. Ray?
Yes, Jesse Ray. So I'm understanding that the community engagement is primarily focused on the African-American community, is that right? Okay, I just want to raise the point that there are some areas throughout all of the IFAs that may need outreach beyond the African-American community. For example, we're talking about housing. We're talking about African-Americans getting capital for their businesses. That's banking. So I think we need to identify components within the whole community that will ultimately be involved in us trying to accomplish these goals for reparations.
Thank you so much, Mr. Jesse Ray. We actually have been having those conversations as well, and a part of this committee, that is something else that we're trying to pull together, is a public-private conversation with other institutions that will help to see. So our recommendations through the city and county's purview, that their extent of their ability to, I think about healthcare, for instance. And how we try to collect the data and get the data requests and all of the things, but a lot of it was outside of the city and county and their realm of influence. That's the best thing. Influence. And so we are looking at doing a public-private conversation with those other entities that need to be at the table. And so, but this is about on the ground community engagement. Them two, they are similar, but that's a whole other conversation, and that has been had. We have been having that conversation, and that'll come to the table a little later, probably at our next meeting.
Are there other questions, comments?
Tiffany.
Where? Oh, Tiffany, please.
All right, Tiffany Debolo here. Thank you, Dewana, for this. It looks great, and I love the timeline. I just have several questions. You're saying we, I was just wondering, who is we? And I do see Buncombe County and Asheville City, but is there gonna be a project manager on this outside of Crawford?
So, the city, actually, we've been having a conversation on how this will be managed, and hopefully we'll be able to pull the pieces together. We have not delved deeper into that conversation because it hasn't been approved for us to move forward with those type of conversations. And so, that's coming, definitely. But, yeah. And when I say we, I'm talking about me, the commission. I work with RJC. I work with a lot of several different people. Rob, several different people on this process.
Okay, and based on this timeline, if the goals aren't met, is there a contingency plan? If these goals are not met, because this is a 3-month goal and we're already behind in the timeline a little bit. So is there a contingency plan if we don't meet the goals that's listed on here past April?
So the reason, the plan actually went through May, but we had to shorten it because we also had to give time for the commission to be able to take the input, if they needed to make adjustments to their recommendations, be able to have that space, because our timeline is June for this process as it stands right now. And so we just wanted to make sure we left space for the commission to actually incorporate the input.
Oh, that's good.
Into the recommendations. And so I honestly think it looks like a lot. I think we definitely can do it. I know, like, this first week right here, I already recruited some people. I'm going to do this anyway because it's necessary. You know what I mean? Like, we cannot skate past it. It's absolutely necessary. And so the door-to-door engagement, which is the only thing that we would technically be happening this week, I do have people that's already ready to do that, but I wanted to wait until we.
Get that. And finally, my last question is, I see the budget is asking for 65,000. I also see that there's a planning committee, which would be additional meetings outside of our IFAs and these meetings. Is there any conversation around any extra compensation for any
It's in the budget. I can't do that. So I feel like this, the budget is what the budget is, because I really am passionate about, and I've said this several times here, and paying people to do the work, especially Black people that's giving time and energy to this process, to do the work. I really find that it's really hard for me to process undercutting or haggling Black people to do work that we wouldn't haggle white people to do. And that they would get paid what they're asking for it to do. And so all of that is included in the budget. Nobody will be doing this work, even the door-to-door canvassing.
That's right.
Because it needs to be people that look like us, knocking on those doors, having these conversations around reparations for Black people. Oh, I'm on.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Asanda?
So just real quick, Sonda McPeters, Tiffany had some of it, but we've had some forms of community engagement, and I see the same people that typically turn out for these engagements. So is there any special strategics to make sure that we are hitting people that we have not heard from or that have not been at the table yet?
So what makes this different is that we're gonna be on the ground in community. We're not gonna be sitting in our centers and where our IFAs meet and hoping people come, or in here, hoping people come to us and hoping different people show up. We actually gonna be out talking and really encouraging the community on the ground who have not been connected to this process. And through social media and all of our platforms for engaging, we about to maximize because it's necessary. And so I can't say that some of the same people won't show up to some of our events, our input sessions and things like that, and our activities. But what I can say is that you definitely go get a different crowd once you put your feet to the pavement and actually are in community. You definitely go get a different perspective.
No, I agree.
Table.
Second thing too,
Sorry.
with what Mr. Jesse Ray said is that a lot of this work is preliminary, and so recommendations they're just the start. There's going to need to be a lot more community engagement when the actual work has to be done. So I think that it's kind of what Tiffany was stating, is that even if we cannot complete this timeline, there's still lots of work to be done after June. So I would keep into contention that we need to have these after this commission is dissolved as well.
Yes, definitely.
All right, MZ Yehuda, thank you for putting your time to this. I just had a suggestion, if it hasn't already been incorporated, that you would get with each of the legacy neighborhoods, if not the commissioners that are representing the legacy neighborhoods, the members from the legacy neighborhoods themselves to join the planning committee to help to organize these events and really get some real involvement in this. That would be my recommendation.
So I have talked to some leaders of the associations. I have been in conversation with them and around the recommendations and things like that. But what we need to recognize is like a lot of our recommendations, especially in this preliminary form, have not been seen by community outside of this process. You know what I mean? And so with the intention that not just our legacy neighborhood, but our public housing communities. Like, it's bigger than that. Our pockets of communities in the county. There's several counties that haven't even been brought up to the table. They definitely not representing it. And so it's looking at all of that. And when I say the planning committee, it's not just going to be the committee. It's going to be the committee that's actually reaching out to those neighborhoods and those communities and engaging them in the process. Like, you got to come to your community. This is what we're trying to do. Do you have any input? Because that's what I did. I was calling people like, look, what's the best approach? You know what I mean? To entering into your community, it's a part of the process, it's a part of community engagement automatically. And so yes, that has been discussed and incorporated.
In all those places, I would recommend getting someone on that committee from that community.
It's a lot of communities. And when I say a lot of communities, and when I say committees, when I say committee, because y'all, our commission knows what our recommendations is. Y'all represent y'all represent an IFA, right? And so when I'm talking about the committee coming from here, how we build out that committee will be discussed as we build the committee. But y'all gotta commit first before we can even go to asking community members to commit, even though a lot of them are here tonight. A lot of those legacy neighborhood members are in the room right now. And so that shows that they committed to this process and this conversation. But I definitely agree. We can figure out what that looks like.
Any other questions? Yes, Mr. Harris.
As a member of the Housing Authority, City of Asheville, have you approached the Housing Authority yet?
So,
You want me to speak on that?
yeah, you can. Thank you.
And in particular, I need to know what I need to do at our next meeting.
Thank you for that question, Mr. Harris. So I did reach out to the office of Ms. Pierre regarding us being able to come in and do some community engagement. I thank Mr. Eric Robinson because he gave me some information to be able to get in contact. There is a form that we have to complete in order to be able to go into public housing, to be able to do community engagement. I am making a call tomorrow. I was asked to give a call tomorrow to the Housing Authority to talk about that. So yes, we have reached out to them. Any other questions? Thank you.
Oh, one last question. As a community member, I can go online and put in recommendations and do that myself, can I?
Put in recommendations.
Or if I have personal recommendation of
Put in input.
yeah,
Community input.
It's a public input
right.
tool that you can use through the city's website, but this, what I'm talking about specifically is let's say Google form. Let me just say it because it's logical for me. A Google form that goes into a folder that every commission member has access to. A lot of the public comment that goes through the city portal, we don't have access to. And so this is a way for us to get access in real time to the input from community on a larger scale. So there is a portal.
Yeah, you just brought up something that kind of stirs me a little bit. I know lately, maybe for the past month or so, we have been getting some emails sent corresponding to information from the community that's been sent to, I guess, to the county or the city website. But has there been any information prior to the last couple of months that has been sent that we can get our eyes on or something? Or has there not been any type of feedback from the community into like the larger city county portal? Because the last 2 months is like the most that I've heard. Now, I don't know what's happened before then, so I'm just asking.
I missed part of your question, I'm sorry. Can you repeat?
So the last 2 months, I've been getting feedback from you. The commission has been getting feedback about some of the suggested recommendations or things from the community at large. But prior to that, the last year and a half prior to that, we haven't been getting that information. So I'm just wondering, does that information exist, or are we just getting the feedback now?
That's a great question. I will be honest, I don't have the answer to that question. I can put that in like a parking lot. I can look that up for you and find out. I will tell you that we have gotten a couple of records requests. That's about it. But I will definitely look and see what I can find and share it with the Greater Commission moving forward. Any other questions? Thank Thank you.
Then I have a question for you all. This is not work that we are forwarding forward to the city council or county commission. This is work that we are assigning to ourselves. But I need to have a sense of what you are thinking, or should we go forward with this model of community engagement? Or are there major hesitations? I just need a sense of the commission. All those in favor of moving forward with this plan, can I see your hands, please? All those in favor of moving forward with this plan, can I see your hands, please? So my sense is that we have a strong sense of the commission that we should engage the community in this forum. Thank you, that really helps.
Perfect. All right, you all, we are going to, yes, ma'am, if you want to send me to the front. All right, takes me longer than those because my videos are so short. Okay, so here is just a brief timeline of where we are right now. We had the first presentation in January for the cease harm audit. Today is our February meeting, so we will be having a cease harm Q&A right after me. We also wanted to at least have a consensus to move forward with a community engagement plan, which is what Mr. Little just shared. And so this line, this purple line here, community engagement efforts on the recommendations, this is where the community engagement efforts will take place, February, March, and April. So we have about 90 days to get this work done. We're going to come back in March. The cease harm audit will be in its final presentation format for you all to hear and see. In April, we will hear a review of the housing, wellness, and criminal justice IFAs, because we've heard from education and the economic development IFAs. So this will be a time for the commission to kind of get feedback and ask questions. May is where we are going to begin preliminary voting on our recommendations. So as a group, you all do have to vote on what to move forward to the city council. And so we're going to begin that process in May, and then we will finalize that in June. So all voting will happen in June. And then we will have a final submission of all recommendations in June to the city council. Does anybody have any questions on timeline here? Yes.
This is Dee Williams. I did have some specific questions, but I see that the Economic Development IFA facilitator is not here. And one of them, a couple of them deal with the global recommendations at the Economic Development Group. I see that the ones from education that are global have been incorporated into the final recommendations, but the one from economic development was excluded. And also, we did some work, and I guess, I don't know if we'll continue to meet as an IFA as far as economic development, but we did put forth some projections, some performance for that global think tank, or the group that, the Ulysses Maneri Institution of the 501c3 that would take over those projections. And also, I guess, and I don't know enough, and I guess we need to go back to make sure that the community groups, we had 6 legacy black neighborhoods that were allocated in those pro formas $250,000 apiece, and the residents of public housing. I guess I'm just not sure of what is going to go forward as far as economic development. And also, the gentleman from Evanston, Illinois came, and this was another economic development IFA. We were looking at, and we did put together some pro formas for a skills training program for justice-involved individuals here. So I don't know, I've seen sketches of it, and I guess I just want to make sure. I'm not used to dealing with a lot of rhetoric. Without a budget, I don't even know what you're talking about. So I just want to make sure that we look like we're competent people. Not only do we submit rhetoric and language, But we also need to be conversant enough to submit budgets. If we're not, then those of us who know how, happy to work with the city and county fiscal and administrative people on it. Thank you. That's it.
Thank you, Dee. I want to respond to your statement regarding the economic development recommendations. We have asked that all IFA facilitators send in their most recent recommendations to put into a form, and so you will see those in that form. So we haven't forgotten about you. I just wanted to respond to that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions, Mr. Hare, Roy?
No.
Ray,
Mr.
Ray.
Mr. Ray, sorry.
Yes, Jesse Ray, just looking forward, or just looking at the timeline in general, and looking at the actual days and weeks and months coming forward, looking at the preliminary voting on recommendations, which are going to come from each IFA, is that correct? So I have two questions. One, will we have a facilitator or an outside consultant or someone to help us narrow down the recommendations? Because each IFA is going to have several recommendations. And then, secondly, will we have more than one meeting in May in order to review all of these recommendations?
Great questions. To answer the first, outside consulting, you looking at her? No, but I am working on a way to help prioritize all of the recommendations. So it's a tool that we'll develop for you all to view. And as far as an additional meeting, I'm gonna bring some up for that one.
So I'm going to add to what Bernicia just said about the tool. The county is also working on a tool that's going to help prioritize the recommendations. It has not been finalized, but they are working on it. And then, Mr. Ray, I missed the last, almost the first part, but the last part of your question about additional meetings.
Well, I was just thinking, with all of the IFAs and the recommendations in all of the, coming from the IFAs, will one meeting allow us sufficient time to absorb and massage and think about all of the recommendations that are coming forward? Can we do it in one meeting?
I am going to say I believe so. That's the purpose of the tools, to help you to prioritize. And so I would think so. Luana.
Just because I just want to follow up on what Mr. Ray said. So, because now I'm confused, just because like the tool that'll come, but we will still have to vote on, like in our IFA, I'm sure we'll use the tool to drill down hours, but we'll still, as a collective, be voting on all of the recommendations. So could we look at having another meeting where we can actually review them and process and be able to, you know what I mean, prioritize, like, understand what each recommendation is, because it's a lot.
Yeah, that's
To have it
happening
2 hours.
in May. That's the preliminary voting. And that's also a chance for us to practice voting so that the June meeting is smooth, right? So these tools, just like we have to create a tool for the community to engage, when we draft these recommendations for the community, like you said, Dawana, there's only 3 sentences, and we do have a framework that we'll share out with everybody, but we'll use the same type of format. But it will be a full meeting dedicated to preliminary voting in May, which will set us up for success in June.
I'm sorry, excuse me.
Yeah, and you will get all of that ahead of time as well. I saw Mr. Dwayne McAfee, and then we'll come to you.
So, Dwayne McAfee, I thought that we were already in our individual IFAs trying to prioritize our recommendations. I also want to point out that there's going to be some overlap with some of the recommendations. So this does not have to be a protracted experiment that we're going to go through if we can remain focused on what our intent is. And I just hope that when we get down to the voting, that we can, hopefully, education, criminal justice, IFAs that I'm a part of, I would like to think that we won't come to this body with 30, 40, 50 recommendations. I don't think that is wise. So I'm hoping that we can streamline them even before we get to the process in May, and then hopefully that'll help us move forward.
Thank you, Mr. McAfee.
Renata, going back to the preliminary and also what he was, Dwayne was saying, in May, when we're trying to, you said one meeting in May, and you're gonna get all of this crunched into 2 hours for the preliminary, for the voting, voting in the preliminary, there you go.
Preliminary.
That word. And that's all gonna be crunched in 2 hours?
Not 2 hours, I think the meeting is the meeting, but there is work that's happening outside of the meeting. So we'll be working very closely with all the IFA group leaders. There's work that has to be done for that meeting to run smoothly.
Because I was just listening, it's like, you know, even though it's gonna be done, and I was like, is this all gonna be done in 2 hours? I don't know how that's gonna be done in 2 hours. And like he's saying, you know, health, wellness, education, you know, it's like, some of us, we all might have the same thing. So, prioritizing, and health and wellness, we're working on trying to prioritize ours as it is, so, you know, just, so all of it won't, you know, we don't all have the same thing. How would you break that down?
So Keith, I saw your hand up. I'm going to respond to you, Renata. You all will be reporting out next month. So that is an opportunity for you to share your recommendations initially with the full council to receive their feedback and then to go back to your respective IFAs as well. So it won't be the first time at this meeting that they will see your recommendations. They will be provided that information next month, and we're going to do our best to get everything out to you all in a timely manner to be able to give you some opportunity to review and have some conversation about it.
Okay, one more question. So instead of March, what is this April?
That's your report out
Okay,
for next month.
okay.
Mr. Young?
Yes, so I was looking at the timeline, and in March, I see we have the final Cease the Harm audit presentation. What I don't see is between April and June, anywhere where this body comes together to debrief on that and include that into our recommendations, considering that you had mentioned that the full council or whatever was going to see our recommendations, but what they won't see is any changes or recommendations that we may have based off of the audit. I don't see that in the timeline anywhere to actually come back to this table and debrief from the audit and incorporate possibly new ideas based on the information that's received.
I think the March meeting will give you the opportunity to do that, Mr. Young. And also those conversations will happen in the IFA groups. Not necessarily here within the 2-hour meeting, but the agenda for March is specifically dedicated to that final report, and there's space for discussion among this group.
So who we got, me? Okay, Tiffany Debelow here. I'm just feeling a heavy weight right now, and none of this feels right. It feels so rushed. I just want to make a comment based on the timeline and then a suggestion. First, we are looking at 90 days to engage community, to input them and include them in a process that we took 2 years and barely got here. Then we're looking at eradicating something in 2 years within 5 months of 400 years of harm to this date. it just doesn't feel like we are at a place where we can truly say that we've made a difference or an impact. And that's not to anyone specifically, it's to this process. I really want to make a suggestion, and I realize that we really fought tooth and nail to request and recommend more time, and that, according to city and county, is not feasible as if we haven't actually done any work. But if we want to look at this before June, we really want to consider following models similar to urban forestry and homelessness, so that as we are transitioning into a new reparations process, we're not just passing off information and leaving it alone and up to the city and county to make a decision for our welfare and future. So I really want to urge this commission, before we get to June, that we start doing some research on how we want to carry this forward and still hold accountable those entities that say they put us here but expect us to fail. Because I believe that we really need to succeed and be intentional. This is not for us, and this is not for us to play nice politics. We should really identify the elephant in the room. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Beverly. Ms. D. Williams?
Yes.
Mr.
Thank you. This is Dee Williams. I was going to ask when the Elise Maneri Institution, the 501c3, could be created so that those of us who want to work on the 1023 with city and county legal can do so, that will carry forth the work of this Reparations Commission. Is that a possibility, and when is that conversation going to happen?
Thank you, Dee. And so I think that is a question for the full commission, because that will be made up, my understanding from the conversations that I've heard in IFAs, that it would be part of the commission that's sitting here today.
Yeah, I think your all's points are well taken, is that there are a number of things in the original resolutions passed by the city and by the county that we have not touched. And by June, it certainly will not be touched. And how we proceed after this timeline, I think, is a valid point of agenda discussion. So.
Mr. McPeters, and then.
Asandu McPeter. So kind of enjoying with Tiffany. I think one thing, I know we were brought here to essentially make recommendations, and I see that that's mostly what this timeline is, but a big part of what we're doing is that there's an accountability piece of not just what we're proposing, but to make sure that harms are stopped and the work is continuing. And I do not see on this timeline, which we shared multiple times, I know myself, I keep putting it into like our survey about accountability and having a discussion about what that looks like, who's gonna be overlooking to make sure the work that we've done continues. And so I think that if anything, I'm not worried about recommendations. I think that, most recommendations are done. There is some fluff to be done, but I think that accountability is a strong suit that needs to be taken serious and discussed as far as us wrapping up our work.
Thank you. Last one, and Mr. Richardson.
Dwayne Richardson. I'm curious to learn more about when you began this portion of the presentation. You said that there were tools that were being designed to help us to narrow down the recommendations, and I'd like to, if you would, share with us a little bit more about those tools. To what degree will those tools work organically with the things that we've already created, the recommendations that we as a commission have created, and what authority will that group take over? Will those tools take over the decisions that we've made? And if those tools are applied, will our work still look the same once those tools are brought to bear?
Yeah, these are tools for the commission to use for the voting process. So it's a way of thinking, right? So we know there's a lot of voices at the table, a lot of opinions, a lot of thoughts. This is to make sure that we stay on track. So when you see it, it's going to be very, very simple. We kind of have some models already drafted, but they're designed with the intent to help move us forward. It's a tool to use for how we do the work, not necessarily what the end result will be. This is just to help us do what we're currently doing. Does that make sense?
I think so, but I'm anxiously awaiting to see what impact those tools will have on the work that we have created.
Absolutely. We got one more, Mr. MD and Mr. Young.
MZ Yehuda, I think in the same realm of what Mr. Richardson was asking, and then in the spirit of Mr. Debelow, we voted to extend the timeline to at least December. That was, the response was no, June. And us speaking about putting forth recommendations, I'm concerned about the language about prioritization, which just sounds like a cutting off some of the ideas that the commission has taken a long time to develop. So I would just like to just reconsider the wording and refining as opposed to prioritization. All of this is a priority. And again, you know, this is hundreds of years in the making. So I know the process on all sides is hard to navigate, but I would just recommend that the wording that we use really allows for more possibilities as opposed to cutting off the possibilities.
Received. Mr. Young.
So I have a question about the conversation around the quote-unquote tools that's being used. Who's in the room to develop these tools? And just out of curiosity, why are these tools being developed at the end result as opposed to in the beginning? Because if people knew that there were going to be tools used to prioritize recommendations and what happens forward, I think folks would have probably tailored their recommendations to the tools. So who's in the room making this prioritization tool, and what are they built on?
Good evening, Dr. Noreen Armstrong, Chief Equity Human Rights Officer for Buncombe County. To your question, Mr. Young, the tool has developed over this whole process that we've been working with you all. And so it is in development, but what we are doing is taking the recommendations that you all have worked on tirelessly and have gotten to a point where you feel good about them and you've refined them. You've received county and city feedback, and you sent them back, and then we have taken them and we're putting them right now in a form where you all can get together and rank them. So if you have 6, then you decide out of those 6 which one you feel is first, which one you feel is second, which one you feel is third. So to what Ms. Parker was saying, it's not doing the work for you, it is helping or changing the work. It's helping you decide out of these 6 which one, if we had to say we really want this one to go forward, this is that one, and then what's the next one from there, what's the next one down. So that is the first iteration where we are. It has been worked on by our strategy and innovation team at the county, along with input from myself and our equity team. And again, it's a draft. We're not finished with it yet, so we don't have anything to show you at this time. We're trying to refine it before we present it to you.
As a just a general comment, at our last housing meeting, we kind of had a general conversation a little bit about something in the same realm, which is that in specifically the housing IFA, and probably in a lot of these IFAs, a lot of the recommendations, specifically with housing, are not necessarily interchangeable, but they can't stand without the others. So like, for instance, if you're asking for individuals to get down payment assistance, education, if we're asking about developments and land acquisition and all sorts of different things that co-intermingle, it wouldn't make any sense to have one recommendation and not have the other, because the recommendation that you put at the top doesn't succeed without the others that are supporting it to make it successful. So it just kind of behooves me to put an arbitrary prioritization on certain things that may work together with better cohesion. Because I know in the middle of this process, we were switched from short, medium to long-term goals to sort of a prioritization thing. And I've said many times in our IFA, some of this prioritization doesn't work because, you know, you can't have a peanut butter sandwich without the bread. It just don't work. And so some of this stuff is just, I don't know if the folks who are coming up with this tool or whatever it is are looking at it in that scope, because it's not just a one-size-fits-all. It's not like, you know, I'm just saying it's way more complex, and I think whatever this tool is y'all about to march out is going to be, and it really is probably going to set us up for failure or set possible, the local government up for failure because they're gonna look at this and run with it. Oh, we got this. This is supposed to be number one. We're gonna do number 1, 2, 3, and then we'll get to the rest when we can. But 1 through 3 probably goes with 3 through 30. And 3 through 30 ain't even there, and they don't even know it because they just see what they get in front of a paper because they weren't here doing this work.
So thank you for that and receive that and appreciate that. And I will say to that end, just as a next step, before this even goes to city or county, the tool is going to be used, or the idea is for you all to use it to help you narrow down, to then help you all decide which ones you want to vote on. So I totally hear what you're saying, but I want to just be clear that the process is for your process to be used to then bring here to the full commission for you all to vote on. So there might be space to expand on those 3, 4, and 5 from 1, 2, and 3.
Final comment, because we're over time. I know we got Q&A for Cease Harm, Mr. Richardson.
Thank you. So most of the IFAs, we're in the process, and I know Mr. Young has discussed this, we're in the process ourselves of prioritizing what our recommendations are. So the things that we have narrowed down to, in the beginning, maybe we did have 10 recommendations, but over the course of time and the work that we've put in, we have prioritized ourselves down to as low as 3, in some cases 2. And so now if a tool is brought in that then further reduces it, to his point, it's going to take away the effectiveness and the cohesiveness of the commission at large. And so I still don't understand how the tool can be brought to bear without having the tool having been designed within our process. So I wait convincing.
Thank you, Mr. Richardson. Yeah, that feedback is received. Dr. Noriel will take it back to the team, and all very strong valid points made. I'm gonna continue on, you all. The next final steps, if we can show the next slide. What we need to do, so we, Dewana, the community engagement team, whoever chooses to sign up to be a part of the community engagement committee with Dewana, will need to reach out to her, or I think you've passed that sign-up sheet around, or we'll begin doing that. And we will reach out, I personally will reach out to all the IFA leaders to help begin drafting a way for these recommendations to be put into a survey type of format for community leaders. So that QR code has to be linked to somewhat of a survey format. There will be a recommendation, I recommend XYZ, strongly agree, strongly disagree, and a place for folks to have some feedback or additional comments. So we have to craft that language so it can be simple for our community members. So that must be done. Also, any CRC members who can participate in the events that was shared on the other side in Dewana's presentation, you'll also reach out to her. Heard loud and clear, Mr. MZ discussed recommendation refinement. And then also, Mr. Young and others, the tool that we will use, Dr. Noriel is going to take that back to her team. Okay, that is my time, you all. We're going to turn it back over to Mr. Yes.
Sorry, just real quick, about writing out, you know, because there's supposed to be a report, I'm understanding, with the recommendations that the commission,
at the end?
that the commission's supposed to be writing. I didn't really see that accounted for in there.
Well, this is just from February to April. This is just, these steps right here is just to get us from February to April.
No, the previous slide.
The
The
timeline.
Yeah, so at what
Final
point?
submission of the recommendations?
So the writing will be included with the final submission?
Yes, yes, sir.
Okay, that's fine.
Okay, all right.
Thank you all. We're a little bit behind schedule. I know that we have Dr. Carter and one of his colleagues waiting to come on. I did want to add something. I want to go back to the community engagement piece. There is a budget of $65,000 that's being proposed. That's correct, right, Dewana? The 65? I just want to make sure that you all understand that you will need to vote on whether or not you want to spend the $65,000 on the community engagement, as well as it will need to go before council. The city manager has the authority to sign up to $90,000, and that money will come out of the $2.6 million that is left in your budget. So I just want to make you aware of that.
What does the budget look like? I'm sorry, this is Dee Williams, and I'm sorry to speak out.
So
What
Dee,
does
if
that
you,
look like?
yes, Dee, that's a great question. If you go into the agenda
Okay,
and you go into, I believe it's the second page, there's a link to the updated budget
okay.
as of 2/16/2024. Okay? Alrighty, so we're going to turn this over to, I think Dr. Carter and his team are ready for us, and then we'll turn the meeting over to the Carter Group. Thank you all.
Testing 1, 2, can you all hear me?
Yes.
Yes. And good evening, everyone. Again, thank you all for tremendously for the work that all of you are doing. I know that this is a lot of work, but this is groundbreaking work. So continue to do the good work that you all are doing. I'm joined today with Dr. LaShawna Wiggs, who is the co-project manager on this. She's also over the economic development IFA team. And again, I'm Dr. Adrian Carter with the Carter Development Group. And I'll allow Dr. Wiggs to say hello to you all.
Good evening, everyone. It's great to be with you this evening.
Hello, Anita.
So we understand that there are some additional questions that you all have after our presentation on last month. And so we're here to respond to those questions. We have about 4 questions. I understand that you all sent in a list of your questions before, so we'll go through that list and then open up to any additional questions or clarifications that's needed. Is that okay?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. The first question we had was, how did you determine which specific artifacts to implement from this audit? I took that as, how did we determine which artifacts to look at or to examine for each of the IFAs? One of the first things our team did was we created what was called a data collection sheet. That data collection sheet was created for each IFA, and the research team for each IFA asked specific questions. So for example, in let's say criminal justice. In criminal justice, they wanted to know the rates of arrest, what the sentencing looked like, are there any programs, diversion programs, alternative sentencing programs, how many stops occur. And I would say in each IFA, we had anywhere from 10 to 12 to 15 to health and wellness had like 30 questions. Those questions guided the artifacts that we received. So if we were asking about arrest rates, or if we're asking in economic development, we want to know how many organizations were funded, how many RFPs were processes did you all have that people engaged in the bidding process? Well, so those questions guided the response that we received. After we got that information back as answers to our questions, we then began to look at each of those artifacts, and by our count, it's more than 1,000 artifacts, with economic development receiving the most artifacts. We reviewed those artifacts and then held cohort meetings with the department heads or whoever the county or city contact was regarding the information we received. And at that point, in order to get questions answered, ask for more data or artifacts to be given to us to continue doing the assessment. Any questions around that? Was that clear? The second question we had was, how was the report informed by the disparity study? The disparity study came out while we were already in our research process. The short answer to the question of how was the report informed by the disparity studies, that it's not heavily informed. The reason why is because we were doing our own study. So we did not want the disparity study to skew our data, because technically it's a separate analysis that's being done. But we did review the information. We found that some of our findings were corroborated by the disparity study, right? But in order to not just lean on the disparity study and doing our own study, we kept that in mind. So we wanted to have a separation in that particular data. But both myself, Dr. Wiggs, and Ms. Hibbert on the economic development team did look through the disparity study. Any questions around that?
Yeah, what was corroborated
Yes,
with the disparity study?
yes, that's a good question.
The utilization issue. Yeah, the utilization issue is the main one that stands out. And then the conversation, again, so what we're doing is we're doing both quantitative, meaning we're looking at numbers and, and we're also doing qualitative, which means we're also talking to people. In the conversations, when we're talking about utilization, that's when we found out more information about what does readiness look like, right? Readiness for the city and the county, readiness of businesses to respond to city and county requests versus utilization, but those two have to match up. So that's where, when we did our presentation, we talked about understanding the utilization issue, but also observing that there's a readiness issue. And so we say, hey, how do we resolve that? That's where a recommendation like a Black Chamber of Commerce comes in, right? To see how we can try to create a better bridge of the utilization and the readiness between the city and county and businesses in the community.
I have a question.
Dee, go ahead.
I have a question. This is Dee Williams. We looked at AMI, average median income, and since it's 2020, it was like 22,000 in the ACI, American Community Survey, the update. It had fallen about $17,000 for the Black community here in Asheville. Is that noted in the report as well, that change, that update with the ACS? And then the other question is there going to be an educational process with city and county staff? Because in a lot of their recommendations to us, based on some of the data and some of the programs that they cite that they fund, when we looked at certain specific data like our loan pool here, one of the things that we pulled out at a special meeting last week was the fact that 100% of all the failed loans that we guarantee are held by African Americans. So is there going to be a process set with city staff so that these, I guess I'm just a little fatigued with taking the same failed programs and using them over and over and funding the same entities. So that's my question. Would those recommendations come forth for a more nuanced and targeted approach, that maybe one that's different, that might bring better results? I don't know if you know what I mean, but that's it.
Yes and no, just to your question. So yes, in the terms that we're going to make some recommendations that's going to have some targeted approaches. Dr. Wiggs, can you talk about the RFP and the vendor listing approach one of the recommendations that we're currently vetting?
Yeah, so one of the recommendations that we have is looking at getting a pool of vendors or through an RFP process. So having vendors or an open RFP that continues to bring in a slate of vendors for services and supplies and things that the city and county procures. One other thing that is part of our recommendations is to look at funding of programs across economic development, right? So we see that there are areas where housing, maybe justice and things like that receive funding, but maybe open up those funding pools to more grant funding for economic development initiatives. So there are a number of recommendations that we have to speak to kind of those targeted approaches.
We're also looking at micro businesses and whatnot. to see how more funding can come into the, to those. And there's actually, we came across a particular policy that actually allows for that, even though, I believe it's the city, that even though they don't necessarily have to implement it, they have a process or they have a policy in place that allows them to implement funding that can go to micro businesses. So we're gonna unpack that a little bit more. Now, I know that my answer is responding more so on the RFP side and not necessarily to the grant funding side or those particular partnerships. Well, I think I would look at it this way. I would say if you see additional gaps or opportunities, then I would say CRC, please make those additional recommendations. In our process so far, we didn't necessarily look at training of staff out for specifically in the context of business, but we are talking about training of staff in the context of equity, racial equity, knowledge base overall, because the workforce within both the county and the city needs tremendous training. Did someone else have a question around that?
Tiffany Debelo here. So I may have missed this, but my question is around, well, first, thank you for the extensive work and research that you've put in to this process. It was super helpful. So as we are at this stage, your recommendations is for us to include in our recommendations? Or will your recommendations be in addition to and in support of the reparations process that would go straight to city and county?
My understanding, right, now this is my understanding.
Yes. Okay.
It's a different understanding, okay? My understanding is that our report is ultimately, our report and audit, and by the way, after I answer your question, I need to explain to you all a shift in it being an audit to an assessment, because that's going to be critical for us to unpack. Our role in this particular audit is to provide recommendations that goes to you all. And those recommendations are for you all to now look at and further add to your collective recommendations as part of your final report that would be going to the city and the county on how to use those reparation funds. Now, at the same time, I think it's prudent and appropriate for the city and county to respond in ways that they can. Even as we've been having our review meetings, last week, I met with someone in the county who works in grants. And based on our feedback, which is that currently there doesn't seem to be an appropriate process that lets us know how African Americans are being positively impacted by grant funds, right? What's the outcomes? You're giving the money to these grant organizations. What are the developmental milestones in the education space? So they've already begun to look at identifying in their process how to ask if you are a BIPOC-led or BIPOC servant organization, and beginning to define that and adding that to their application process. So not to say that the city and the county should appropriately begin to implement, right, and make changes where they see the opportunities, even based on our preliminary findings, which you can, in that example, you can see that they already. So it's my understanding, though, that our work is supposed to ultimately come to you all for you to add as part of your collective recommendations for your final set of recommendations to the city.
Okay.
And really quickly, I just want to point of clarification that it is more of a both and. The final report that will be done by the Carter Development Group will be for city and county to work to implement some of their recommendations so that any harms that have been done can be ceased. So it's not solely just what Dr. Carter said. It is, but it's mostly from you all's recommendation to us as city and county to then say, oh, okay, we see where we were making errors or where we have room for improvement. Let's try to make those improvements.
Thank you, Dr. Armstrong. So just point of clarity for me. Now, so we're looking at this assessment from the Carter Group coming to us in March, and we are aware that the county will be completing its process in April. Is that correct? Or are you going to go until June? Dr. Armstrong, I'm not sure.
What do you mean by completing our process?
Well, when we had our several meetings, you mentioned that the time allotment was not approved by county commission, and so therefore, the time for the county support with this process would end in April.
No. So thank you for that as well. Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
So for the county involvement at the level that it is currently, with all the staff that we have that are working on this, will continue until June 30th. As of June 30th, the county and staff, well, not county and staff, county staff at the level that they've been working, there's 23 staff members that have been doing different pieces, data, strategy, innovation, equity, human rights office. Some of those staff will not be continuing on in that facet. My office of equity and human rights will continue to support reparations in a oversight type of manner after June 30th. But till June 30th, you have county at this level that we are currently.
Thank you. That is so helpful to know. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I have a question. This is Dee Williams. This is a performance audit. I know we've dubbed it Cease the Harm audit, but what I'm used to is an audit comparable to an inspector general's performance audit, simply because the city and county are public entities that are supported by taxpayer dollars. Overall, what I'm looking for, and the only reason why I thought it would be a good idea, is the fact that these dollars have been used for quite a long time to fund not only city and county government, but also contractors and subawardees who purport to provide services to cease harm or to improve the conditions, to abate the disparities that have happened in the Black community. Yet the data, when it comes back, says that it has not really happened in any substantial fashion. Will there be recommendations? I'm being very frank right now, very lucid, very intentional about what I'm saying. Number one thing, will there be recommendations to not just continue, the definition of insanity, to continue with these same sub-awardees, because it looks like, based on the data that I've seen, that it has been a waste of taxpayer money because the results are lacking. And number two, to maybe bring some capacity to Black-led organizations to provide these same services in a nuanced, if you will, and culturally competent way. Thank you.
That's a very good question, which is the question that talks about, will the subawardees contractors with municipal governments granted whatnot? So I was actually coming to that question next. Dee, the answer to your first question is no, we won't be indicating or recommending to stop funding or awarding any entity that's been awarded. What we will be recommending is the necessity to collect better data on the awardees from the awardees on how the money is being spent and what are the outcomes that the city and the county have when providing those dollars. And some organizations and some of those processes are better than others, but there is tremendous gaps that Dr. Wicks can surely have more than enough time to elaborate on, that we will be recommending. So we won't say to stop servicing anyone, but we would say that they need to change. They need to develop better processes around identifying outcomes that they want from these organizations and how they're going to measure that outcome. And I think once that's in place, then what you're saying kicks in. If they're not providing the outcomes or meeting the metrics that says that this is a successful or viable entity, then we begin to look at other entities. The second part of your question, talking about Black-led organization, I think that's where there's an opportunity for the city and the county and for yourselves as leaders in the community and businesses to really talk about what type of infrastructure do you all need to set up in order to develop Black businesses. I think what the city and county can do is, going back to the recommendation that we have that talks about the industry and the spent dollars. Mm-hmm. I don't know if you all are familiar with, I believe it's spend.gov. And that particular website shows shows from the federal government all of the money that's being spent, where it's going, what industry, all of the the codes that they're, the SIC codes or the NAICS codes that they go to. So it shows where those dollars are. And what we're recommending is that the city and the county do the same thing. Develop a dashboard that shows on an annual basis and for however long they're able to pull that data into a database, show where the money's going. That way, Black businesses know where monies are being spent, and Black businesses have the opportunity to adjust their companies to meet the mark. Secondly, whether it's Urban League, in addition to a Black chamber, right? And more support systems are in place. And I do think the city and the county can do a more effective job around how they develop incubators for Black businesses, right? So that's, and I know they have they have a program. I don't want to call the wrong program, but I believe it's with the college.
Yes, SBA, it's like a business incubator at AV Tech or whatever.
Right, yeah.
Next APO.
Okay, so okay, I was gonna say next ABO, but I didn't want to be wrong. But I think there are opportunities to do better in those spaces, and also in how they support those micro businesses as well.
Doctor, I know you have other questions to address.
Yeah, Joyce. I want to come back to where you're talking about the Black Chamber. I think a Black Chamber is one of the big recommendations that you should make to the city and the county, because what it does is it opens up a window for Black businesses, both small and large, and for nonprofit and for-profit businesses to get together and to share ideas. If you have some type of recommendation of where you've already seen this happening in other cities or wherever it's happening, if you can make a recommendation based on what they're doing, how they set it up, who set it up, and if there are fees charged for those businesses to become members of that chamber. What I see a lot of times is that a lot of businesses, minority businesses, Black businesses, will not participate because of funding that they have to pay to be a member of that particular organization. I would like to see some type of recommendation where there are no fees charged for a Black Chamber of Commerce to be set up, and those businesses can communicate and work with each other.
That's a good point. So two things to that, and the camera focused on you so I could almost see your name, but I can't see it.
Oh, I'm sorry. It's right here.
Thank you, George. So, in our recommendation, we will have links to other chambers of commerce as a comparative for you to be able to go to their website and see more information. I would say this, I'm a part of my Chamber of Commerce here in the South Florida area. The way that our chapter has, or our chamber has it set up, is that there are fee levels. So if, depending on the size of the business and the level that you want to enter the chamber, it's $300. And then you have the cost that goes up. So from a business perspective, I don't know how many chambers are allowing members without doing business, right? But I do believe that, I agree that how can it be nominal enough, right? So that it's not creating an access issue, which defeats the whole point of having one.
That's right.
The second thing to keep in mind, everyone, is that the Black Chamber of Commerce is really a business opportunity in and of itself that's open for the general public, right? So this will not come out from the city or the county. What we want to do, or said we, but what I want to impress on you all, because when you do the work for so long, you become a part of the community, right? So what I would like to see happen is if someone from amongst you or otherwise takes up the mantle to say, I'll go register the business as a nonprofit, what that does is it then provides you an opportunity to partner with the city and the county. And I think the fact that this is coming up in this type of a conversation, and we've been having this conversation with the city and county, then they're poised for someone in the community to take up that particular mantle. That does what? Well, that gives direct funding through dollars. That creates opportunities for incubators. That creates opportunities for workforce development. So as long as someone in the community is business savvy enough to willing to take on the responsibility of the nonprofit, it opens up an opportunity that's I think that can be tremendous for Black businesses in your community.
Okay.
And I will add, Dr. Carter, that if you do a Black chamber within the city of Asheville, you could also associate with the National Black Chamber, which also opens up additional opportunities and networking abilities for businesses in the area.
I had another question. This is Dee Williams, about the National Minority Supplier Development Council. Have y'all looked at that? Because there is also not only, that's really a bidding opportunity with corporate, with large corporations like Linamar locally and other things. And there's also some attendant funding, some lending that comes with that. Have you taken a look at that? This is the only region in North and South Carolina and Virginia that does not have a Minority Supply Development Council. Have you looked at that?
No, we had not taken a look at that.
Yeah, we have Carolina's Minority Supply Development Council, and I believe I interfaced with your Florida chapter at some point, but it's been a while ago. They're all over the country, but this is the only region that does not have a Minority Supply Development Council in the two Carolinas and Virginia. So I was looking at that when the city was talking about a race-conscious contracting program. They usually wrap with cities on that, and that gives opportunity.
Dr. Carter? This is,
yes.
This is Dr. Mullen. This is Dwight Mullen. I only had access to your preliminary report through the slide presentation that you presented, so I don't know if it's in the fuller report. But I'm wondering if you cover accountability in these different areas. In terms of stopping the harm, I was particularly interested in where that harm was originating and the accountability measures designed to identify and stop those behaviors.
In the larger report, I'm at the report is open here, and I just want to go to a section. I could tell you the name of the section that speaks to what you have. So there's a section in the report that's the working title is The Groundwater Effect for Workforce Inequities. The groundwater effect for workforce inequities. In that section of the report, which is going to be its concluding section, is I want to tie together how different aspects of lack of racial intelligence and leadership, inconsistent leadership within county and city government can play a role in creating harm. I'm referring to it as groundwater because we're looking at, right, where it can potentially originate from. Now, that's not to say that that we're finding or we have found specifically where harm has begun within the county or city, because we're talking about a systemic issue. And while talking about a systemic issue, you're also talking about people who've come into positions and who are simply just operating within an institutional organization that's already been set up to do what it's doing. I think the opportunity that the city and the county has is racial equity training. And how does it do an effective job of infusing racial equity metrics throughout all of its departments? And I do believe the county is taking a step toward that, and the city are both taking a step toward that, in order to pull together a comprehensive racial equity plan that serves the county and the city in their respective spaces, that also leads to cease and harm. So I think so far, in my understanding of the work that we've been doing and the data that we found, I think that's the best job that we're able to do, is to point it out in that particular fashion. And that's where the training comes in and the comprehensive approaches per department and how they're going to impact racial equity in a positive way. But I wouldn't say that we've been able to identify a sole source or a particular department or person that's in that, from which this is germinating.
One of my concerns, away from the economic development areas, this is Dwight Mullen again. One of my concerns, apart from the economic development areas, has been health and wellness, in that the morbidity rates and mortality rates by race and by gender are incredibly disparate. And we can identify the institutions those deaths and the illnesses are taking place, but I don't, again, understand accountability. And I'm wondering if your report covered that for that particular IFA area.
What we've looked at in health and wellness is looking at the services that the county especially provide, which is plenty. I believe they have more than 40 partners. Some they fund directly, and some they just partner with and give them the opportunity to get exposure through the county and have potential patients or clients referred their way. In that part of the study, it doesn't necessarily get into a broader conversation that can be found in the community health assessment or the community health improvement plan, which looks at it in general. The services being offered by the county is what we're specifically assessing. The gap we found there is that they're not collecting data from these partners, especially the ones that they're funding, so that we can know how well they're actually serving the community. They've also been very forthcoming in saying that there are some organizations, going back to Dee's point from before, that they've been funding, but why? Why are they the only ones that they continue to fund, and why are they not looking at other organizations that can also do the same work? So we've had some transparent conversations in there, but that's relatively the scope of our work, Dr. Mullen. We've not looked at it broader in terms of those type of data that you're talking about, just because it's not within the scope of the city services.
Yeah. And I don't mean to dominate this. It's just I had a series of questions after looking at the preliminary report. And one is dealing with education. With education, the end of course, in the grade results, the disciplinary measures, the hiring and retention of faculty and staff, and the matriculation challenges of bringing students in and graduating them educated without dropping out. Those were taken from the federal judge that was overseeing desegregation. Those were his areas of oversight as the systems were merged in the late 60s, early 70s. And so I'm wondering, without federal court supervision, again, accountability for dealing with those on an equitable measure, is your report covering who should be doing that between the city and the county?
Well, I would leave it at the level of the county, from the standpoint that the county provides the funding to the school districts.
Sure do.
What we are recommending, which is, we're making a recommendation that really sits on the outskirts of within the boundaries of the study that we're doing. But we felt that it was necessary to make this particular recommendation, as Mr. Fothery from the Reparations Summit pointed out, the need to pursue legislative changes. And the need for legislative changes in the space of education is what more can the county do? What say can the county have when providing those dollars to education, right? Can the county require that the faculty and staff ratio to Black or to African-American students, right, reflect properly? Can the county, or should the county be able to say, hey, we require certain levels of sensitivity or cultural sensitivity training. Matter of fact, we need to have a training specifically as to why Black students are significantly lesser part of the population, but yet they have the highest disciplinary numbers, right? And let's have a direct conversation about that. And I'm not looking at it from a standpoint that the county should use education dollars and hold the school districts hostage with that money. But what I'm saying is, legislatively, can there be change that says, in addition to giving you this money, there are also demands that should be met that is dictated by the county in order for us to cease harm against African American students.
Yeah, that really helps. And just one more. In addition to economic development from the top, one of the things that's concerned, I feel it around the table, is the increased rate of poverty that's happening at the bottom. Do we know what's driving that? Do we know from the report of not just what's generating wealth, but what's also generating poverty?
I could say we didn't specifically look at that in the scope of our report. What we do have data on general income, and I would say when it comes to the issue of poverty and the biggest impact that has happened, I would say in housing, and when we look at affordable housing, what those AMI numbers are, and what the income levels of African Americans, that those median, the median incomes are. So that's where we've mostly looked at when we talk about matters of poverty and disproportionality or any kind of inequities when it comes to that housing aspect, but not in general poverty.
Thanks. Thank you.
I have a question.
I'm
John Ross.
Are you,
No.
I'm sorry.
No.
public comment?
You can't make a comment now.
Do we have any other questions from the CRC?
I do. This is Dee Williams again, and I just want to know, do you find that the city and county violated any ordinances, laws, or other statutory requirements for relieving disparity or increasing opportunity? I think that was one of the outcomes. Have you determined that, or is that something that, I know it's a legal issue, but has that been looked at? Because we do know what the 14th Amendment is in Title VII.
Based on our findings, we didn't see anything that was in breach of their ordinance or any legal regulations. So that's the quick and short answer to that.
This is Tiffany Debolo again, my final question. Just going back to what Dr. Mullins was speaking about in terms of economics and poverty. We know that in Buncombe County is 12.4% the poverty rate here. We also know that the Black population is about 8%, which has decreased. So has there been any recommendation just around income increase or livable wage?
What?
Or living wage?
In looking at, go ahead.
I was just correcting my word, living wage.
Yeah, no, we did not look at the community at large. Our study was really centered around city and county services. The conversation has come up about equity, pay equity, right, for government, for city and county employees. Our recommendation around that is that the city and county conduct a pay equity audit, which is outside the scope of what we're looking at. So that's where that pretty much summed that up for us. So we did not look at that, at living wages on the broader, more community scale.
Thank you.
Jesse Ray, in relation to that question, I'm looking under the education recommendations, and of course, I don't know if this sheet obviously does not have all of your recommendations on it, but what catches my eye in reference to Debelo's question and what we're talking about in reference to poverty is that we see here on this sheet that we have, you stated require universal assessment tool for early childhood education, grant-funded programs. Did you look at higher levels of education? Did you look in the high school area to see the harms and what failings are impacting the community? Because wages, to some extent, is dependent on education. And so if our students are not being educated to the level where they can obtain a living wage job or a skill or a technical skill or a professional skill, then yes, of course, the wages are going to be low and there's going to be poverty. So I guess getting back to my question did you look beyond early childhood education in your assessment?
So the scope of our work, Mr. Ray, was around city and county operations. So whatever the city and county has reach or has impact in is what we looked at. So that's why we are making the recommendation about legislative changes that gives the county more authority when dispersing those dollars to K through 12 education. The county has an early childhood education program that's within their purview. They manage that, they fund it. The city has a strategic partnership program and an opportunity gap program, which is also educationally related, but that may not be specifically an early childhood education program. So in looking at education, we looked at it within what does the county and the city have control over? And that's why that only focuses on early education. It does not have control in the K through 12 space other than the funding that the county gives to it. However, what we did was we still received the report that showed what the academic achievement numbers are for K through 12, reading scores and math scores. And even though that somewhat was outside the purview of our study, that's why we're making the recommendation about those legislative changes that can have a positive impact at some level on faculty, training, and the contact that African-American students are having at a higher or at a disproportionate rate with police and with disciplinary matters within the school system.
MZ Yehuda here. There's certain information that some of the CRC feels should have been discussed or at least assessed as part of this audit. Could you provide recommendations as to how to study some of the topics and assess some of the topics and areas that your audit did not cover? Could that be part of your recommendations to further some of the exploration into some of the topics? I'm seeing the survey results. I'm seeing assessment of Black employee perspectives, those that work for the city and the county, assessment of Black perspectives on services provided by the city and the county. Looking at areas that the scope of your report is not handling.
I would say yes, and I think we're actually already doing that. That's a couple things that are outside the scope of a couple recommendations that's outside the scope of what we're doing. I'm gonna mention a couple, I'll tell you why. First, the reason why we have these handful of recommendations is because I think in order to tie everything together, these need to be in place. So when we talked about the Black Chamber, we can't talk about readiness and utilization if we don't also, what's going to be the solution for it? And even though the solution is outside of the city or county, we're making a recommendation, right, to create a chamber. So that's outside of our scope. There's also a recommendation which has not been mentioned yet because we didn't bring it forward. And you just bear with me. I'm scrolling to the report to get to that section.
Dr. Carter, while you are looking at that, I just wanted to be mindful of time. We have a few public comments, we have a vote, we got a couple different things that we need to do. So once you find that and share your information, if there's any final comments that you would like to make, that'd be appreciated, and we'll move on to our next phase.
Yeah, so a couple of the things outside of the scope I mentioned to you is the Black Chamber. We talked about legal changes with the school district, the industry and utilization list on how dollars are spent. And then we're also looking at designated historic preservation of legacy communities. And we're looking at what the city says about that, which it does have in its code and rules for it to allow that. So we've also been doing some research around what would it look like and what would it take for certain legacy communities to be designated as a historic preservation, and what is the impact of that for those communities. So again, not necessarily within our scope, but again, when we look at the matters of harm within the community and how it crosses in and throughout county and city services, those are some of the things that are outside of scope, but I think still plays an important part. Okay. All right, thank you. I hope that we didn't take more time than what we were supposed to, but.
You're good, thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Dr. Clark.
Thank you. All right, we're moving on to next steps. And so we do need to still vote on community engagement because it'll be another month before we are all at the table to make that vote. And so we definitely need to vote on moving community engagement forward as presented to y'all tonight.
I make a motion to accept. I second. I'll second the motion. Already second.
Can you all,
I'm sorry.
excuse me, can you all say your names as you make the motion?
I'm sorry, Joyce Harrison, I make the motion.
Bobette May, second. Yeah.
Go ahead.
All those in favor of approving the community engagement initiative as it has been presented to the commission? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? All those abstaining? The motion carries.
I'm so proud of you.
And I just want to ask, that can go up to $90,000, correct?
It can, but it wouldn't, but yeah, it can.
Okay. Just want to put that in. Thank you.
All right, we are moving to public comment.
We have several signed up. Let me remind you of the standards for public comment. We're keeping time to 3 minutes for each speaker. We expect respect. And in terms of content, please make it germane to reparations. This is John Huey, Mr. Huey. Thanks.
My name is John Huey. I'm a citizen of Asheville. I've lived here about 20 years. The reason I stand here tonight is to testify that thousands of the white folk in Asheville and Buncombe County want to double down as unflinching allies of this Reparations Commission and of the black community. We celebrate your work through all the storming, forming, and norming. We are highly aware that none of us will be free until all of us are free. The work you are doing is liberating for all of us. When Martin Luther King and SNCC volunteers marched in the streets of my hometown, Albany, Georgia, when I was 24, 1961, I was there watching, but I did not march with them. I did what we white people usually do. I watched, and I took no risk. Now I'm standing up. I believe the work of this commission should be based on the white community's full acknowledgement of historical reality, historical truth. There are organizations, black-led ones in this city, who have done a wonderful, amazing job of penetrating white consciousness. Faith for Justice, Racial Equity Institute, Building Bridges, and many others. I've been the recipient of some of those courses. And my question is, has the City Council and the County Commission's acknowledgement of historic reality, historic truth, gone far enough and deep enough to give the Reparations Commission the rock-solid foundation that will make your work sustainable? I answered my this question for myself only. I acknowledge the unspeakable cruelty that my ancestors perpetrated on your innocent ancestors. Slavery, the Middle Passage, whippings, lynchings, murders, intimidation, dehumanization, and brutality beyond belief, beyond words. I acknowledge the perpetuation of cruelty in our laws, our schools, our churches, our government, our businesses, our redlining, our norms and attitudes, our habits, our white supremacy culture across the board. The callous neglect and countless injustices which continue right in front of us here in Asheville and Buncombe County today. In the words of Rob Thomas, quote, "The urgency of this moment cannot be overstated. White folks must embrace the moral imperative of the moment and stand up for comprehensive disparity studies in each impact focus area.
Thank you, Mr.
Then
John.
support swift action to rectify the historic injustices that plague our community. The time for
so much,
repair
Mr.
is now."
John.
Thank
And I
you.
for your time.
Yeah, thank you so much, sir. Up next is Robert Thomas.
What is this? Brandon Mays? This one. I think this one.
All right. First, I would like to start with a comment about division and divisive actions. You know, divisive actions are necessary to cut the wheat away from the chaff. We are not unified and have not ever always been unified, but one of the biggest issues to our movements is hiding those who are destroying our movements from the inside out. You know, I ask you, who are the individuals that are denying the extension or the bureaucratic nature in which that the denial is even compromised in? Because it is not how the denial of the extension is formulated is simply by taking away the resources. Let me calm down. If you look at the nature of the way that the extension is being played out or being prevented, it's simply by taking the resources and the staff itself away from the process. It is not an official political denial of the extension, so that nobody can really point fingers at who is doing it. From my understanding, staff has stated that they see no reason to extend the process. And I urge you all to push them to extend the process. There is no way that we can involve the community in a proper form and fashion without an extension. Now, I came up here and I actually wanted to go over the history, but I don't have enough time. I wanted to go over the history and how this even started, who we were doing this for, the most impacted, the most disenfranchised individuals, and how they have been kept out of the process. I wanted to talk about the non-negotiables that me and others, when I was working with the RJC, have been harping on since the beginning. You know, we went from one entity to another, from a blended component unit to ideating something similar to the One Buncombe Fund to where we're at now. The only negotiable that we got implemented was the seed funding. The third negotiable was the black community being in control and participating in every part of the process. Now, if anybody knows strategy, if anybody knows how this plays out, I've heard you all mention accountability several times. Accountability is held by the community. All due respect to Noriel Armstrong and other individuals, but how are you going to hold your supervisors accountable? You know, how can you actually call them out strategically and force them to do things that they don't want to do? You can't. I also want to invite you all to a conversation with Harvard students that we're having to go into legally defensible approaches for positive racial discrimination.
Thank you, Mr. Thomas.
It'll be on the 29th of February. More details will come.
Thank you.
No, I think that's crossed out.
I think it's Wiseman, last name Wiseman. Wiseman? Kurt? Is that Kurt? Kurt Wiseman?
Okay, go to the next one.
Okay. Brandon Mays?
Can you repeat the name again, please? Can you repeat the name again, please?
His name?
Yes,
Brandon Mays.
thank you.
Yes, my name is Brandon Mays, last name M-A-Y-S, no E in it. I'm coming up here just speaking about how reparations impacted me in my thought process. When it came through, I kept asking the question, who would reap the benefits? Hearing some of the data that was collected through the studies that came through, we know that gentrification is sweeping the nation. Asheville is not immune to it. I look at my neighborhood in Shiloh, what it's transformed into. And so I look at who reaps the benefits from reparations. You look at intervals of how does it look 10 years from now? How does it look 5 years from now? Even 2 years from now? Will my son be able to reap the benefits from reparations in the community where we stay? I also look at the equality of the reparations throughout the neighborhoods, communities, as people call it. Ideally, we would like to equally distribute it. Realistically, could it happen? I don't know. There may be some disappointment if it doesn't. But the more division we have as we try to come through with this process, the harder it is to push forward, the more time comes through. I believe one of the statistics came up, there is an 8% population of black people in Asheville. Look at the wages, living wage, look at housing markets, everything going on with it. And it's just, I'm hopeful that this will push through. I know that we need to stand together on it, but we'll see what happens.
Thank you. Kim Collins?
No comment at this time. I yield back my time.
All right. Jim Stokely?
Thank you for giving me a little time. My name is Jim Stokely. I'm president of the Wilma Dykeman Legacy, headquartered in Weaverville. Just 3 points. The first point is I consider this the most important initiative in Asheville and Buncombe County of the 2020s. I'll get back to that later, the idea of a decade. But I do want to say that Dr. Jonathan McCoy, who's director of the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion program at Mars Hill University, led our Wilma Dykeman Legacy Board through a process where we signed unanimously onto the Racial Justice Coalition's organizational pledge to support this commission and its work. And I'll have to say we continue to have full confidence in this group, in its whatever the recommendations will be, and we will support you. And finally, I'm in favor of an extension to December, but even if that doesn't go through, I take June the 30th as the kickoff to the football game. These recommendations that y'all are going to come up with and that we're going to support is basically the result of a lot of pre-game strategizing and skull work and a good set of initial recommendations. And the game is going to last at least through the end of this decade. So that's when the game is going to begin and where the rubber hits the road, and I'm looking forward to it. Basically because of you all. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Charles Wright. Charles Wright.
There he is.
Thank you.
Yes, my name is Charles Wright, and I believe in
cash payments for reparations. And I'd like to say that the stuff y'all recommended, cash payments can definitely solve that. For instance, like I can buy my own house, and also I can start a business, and also I can pool my money with other black people, like-minded, and we can build our own hospitals, our own schools, our own black chamber of commerce, and also community centers. And also, I'd like to say that I feel that cash payments should have been like it should have been part of the, on top of the recommendations. Thank you.
Our next meeting is scheduled for March the 18th. Please note it in your schedules. And is there a motion to adjourn?
I move, Mr. Chairman, to adjourn.
D. Williams has moved. Is there a second?
I second.
I can't see. Second. All those opposed,
Bobette second.
please say aye. I'll take that silence as good night.
Good night.